Good afternoon, all you awesome people out there. My name is Scott Churchson, alongside Mr. J.D. Walker, Mr. Obie Spencer, and of course, Mr. Brandon Kay. And welcome to the Sports Den on Spanglish World Network, Zingo TV, channel 249 and 250. Kindly remember to download the Zingo TV app on the app stores of iOS and Android. When you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. Both apps are free. By the way, one last thing, Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Bottom line, if you have any modern technology, you can get yourself some Zynga. All right, gentlemen, hope you guys are doing well out there. We are going to be covering a plethora of topics today on the Sports Den, talking a little basketball, talking a little Formula One, the age-old debate in the New York area, which team is better, the Yankees or the Mets, and we're going to cover the pitching part of that. That's actually Brandon's topic, so we'll have to see what he has to say on that. But first and foremost, we're going to start off with the NBA playoffs. Yesterday, Steph Curry made some history.
Yeah, so Steph is the first person to make 500 3-point field goal attempts, or at this, buckets at this point in the playoffs. And we were talking about this a little before we came on air here. At this point, he's either reaching milestones that nobody has gotten to yet, or he's just piling on top of his own records. And at this point, every year feels like a new historical feat is going to be accomplished by him, and it's great to watch.
Yes, I mean, Steph is fantastic. He does something that nobody else has ever done before. But with all due respect to Steph Curry, no one else had ever been asked to do before. So it is great.
LeBron,
but not even LeBron. If we played this style of basketball today, would Larry Bird have even more threes? Would even Reggie Miller have had more threes? So again, the question is, how long are these records going to stand with Steph resetting the way basketball is being played? Is this like a passing yard record that Dan Marino had until the game totally changed? Or is this like the passing yard record that, let's just say, Brady and Breeze were fighting over every game? So that's really the great thing about Steph, or the thing that we're going to be able to measure Steph's greatness. He changed, or the game changed while he was there. He may be the catalyst of that change, but he's going to set records that no one else can catch in the future. JD, your thoughts?
I think it can be both, because Curry is doing what Brady is doing in the passing yards record, which is he's going to put that so far out of reach that while it is changing the style of play, it's going to take a while for players to catch up to him. I mean, by the time Curry's done, I'm more surprised when I hear that there is a 3-point record of anything involving 3-point shots that Steph Curry doesn't have at this point. I do think that the sharpshooters of the past, Larry Bird essentially would be Steph Curry today. Just the 3-point shot has been around for, I believe, about 40 years in the NBA, but it hasn't been used as a weapon as much as it is now until the past 15 years or so. I mean, it's been steadily increasing, but it's going into a whole new territory now. So these 3-point records, I think they will eventually be like looking at passing yard statistics from the 60s and 70s in the NFL, where with the numbers that were top of the league back then are barely league average today. I do think that we're headed in that direction as well.
In this case, what surprises me a little bit is the fact that nobody in NBA playoff history ever hit 500 before. I was a little surprised. I think maybe you guys were as well, that nobody had actually hit that feat. Because you mentioned Bird, you got Kukoc, you got a bunch of other people out throughout history that have made a ton of playoff appearances, but surprisingly never hit that plateau.
I thought maybe Steve Kerr would, between all of his Bulls runs and his Spurs runs, and stuff like that. And he was in a time period where, yes, he was a 3-point shooter too. Mm-hmm. So I figured with some of the longevity he might have, but
I never get surprised when it comes to playoff counting statistics they're always being set, because there's playoff counting statistics. Every time we close our eyes and open our eyes, we are talking about another sport adding another layer of playoffs.
Yep.
So they just again, Steph is being asked and doing something that no one has ever done before with the before with the 3-point shot. And we are seeing other guys who are doing it as well, not maybe as great or arguably better.
Kobe.
Right. But Kobe wasn't asked to shoot three, but Damian Lillard's now shooting threes like this. We're seeing
Trae Young is.
Trae Young, right? New guys are coming into these guys who shot like Steph, but they may not have shot as well. They were not asked to lead a team. The game used to be played from the inside out, and now the game's played from the outside in. Probably has a lot to do with going to allow zone defenses to stop Shaq, and that was it. They said, okay, we can't stop Shaq with man. We're going to have to go to zone. They allowed zone in the NBA, and that opened up the perimeter shooting in a way that great shooters have now been able to take optimal advantage of when they come into the league. And so you have a guy like Steph, who, by the way, I love. So I'm not trying to denigrate what he did. He's playing the game with the rules they are now. He's being asked to do and doing successfully something that no one's truly been asked to do before. But yeah, I think Dame is doing it. Trae Young is starting to do it. Even Ja may get to that point. Like LeBron shoots a lot of threes, but not as effectively. And he came in still under the idea that my athleticism and the inside game was going to be what dominated basketball.
The only person that could in today's game, but it is too late, is James Harden. But he does not live up to the playoffs. I mean, Steph has had some playoff issues in more singular moments, but as a collective resume, Harden has playoff issues. So it would be him, albeit maybe an injury and stuff like that. But the playoffs, it's not his forte, we'll say.
You're right.
You could say the same for Durant. Aside from riding Curry's coattails to a few titles, he really hasn't done much outside of that, except for one that would have been a 3-point shot to in the series against Milwaukee last year if he didn't wear shoes that were 2 sizes too big.
That's true. Losing a game 7 at home because your foot was too big or your shoe was too big.
Yeah, and all of this is, and the game absolutely has changed because you could tell from watching the Last Dance documentaries 2 years ago. You go back and look at the game footage from the 80s and 90s. The defense, the hard-nosed defensive styles that were played back then by the Bad Boys Pistons and the 90s Knicks and Bulls series. Like these players would be arrested if they played like that now. They'd be charged with assault before the game is even over. But so by changing the zone defense rules to kind of open up the game a bit more and encourage an increase in scoring, which every sport has tried in some form or another. Baseball is currently trying it now, depending on whether or not they feel like juicing the ball, creating more offense. Offense sells tickets. Hockey did it by changing the rules to shaft Martin Brodeur because he was too good at playing the puck, and the Devil's neutral zone trap defense, which won 3 Stanley Cups in the 90s and early 2000s. That was effective, but it was tough to watch if you were not a fan of that team. And Brodeur's puck handling as a goalie. They changed the markings on the ice where goalies could only play the puck from certain spots. It reminds me a lot of the similar discussions now about banning the shift in baseball because players don't know how to hit to the opposite field anymore. That same conversation goes to the NBA and the NFL too, with where you can't breathe near a receiver without it being pass interference. So all the sports are doing the same thing in one way or another over the past 20 years or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And the NFL, I think, kind of does it most effectively because they do it every year. And so you don't notice it until you look. Like, oh, this year, this is the rule that's going to get changed. Why? Because Tom Brady broke his knee. So now you can't tag. And then you're like, whoa, wait, there's such a small zone. But the incremental changes as opposed to the the giant changes, which baseball's now has to make because they didn't make incremental changes. So now they have to make monster changes because they didn't say, oh, the shift is coming up. Let's start with just you can only have, two guys, whatever, add lines to the field. And this is what, but they didn't do that. And now they have to make huge changes because they haven't made incremental changes. And then they can't keep a ball the same, which of course affects the entire game. In that game more than any other.
Yeah. Well, especially in baseball, as you said, the NFL has rules committee meetings every off season. Baseball practically takes an act of Congress to get anything changed.
To get anything changed.
Yeah.
And with about the same level of effectiveness and progress as Congress these days. Doesn't matter what part, just all of it.
And then it allows Tom Brady to make a social media posts where he's like, yeah, it was a fumble. Yeah, we know it was a fumble against the Raiders.
Future Fox Sports analyst Tom Brady.
I had to. I'm sorry. I had to.
$375 million, and he hasn't even done that yet. How awkward must it be for, I think it's Greg Olson, who's supposed to be the number one analyst for Fox this upcoming season.
Who's very good at it.
Him and Burkhardt have worked so well together in the last few years.
Right, yeah. Burkhardt and Olson moving up to the number one team. Olson has essentially been fired before he even calls a game as the number one analyst next to Burkhardt. How awkward must that be to be fired from a job you haven't even
since Buck and Aikman went to ESPN? Yeah, I
didn't see Tom going this route.
I think it's shocking. Honestly, a quarterback of this quality going into the booth. Granted, we did just kind of see Breeze go in this direction. He, I think, is the closest to be that high up. Fouts in the past.
NBC isn't paying him
Marino with CBS.
Romo's not even making that much.
Right. And I don't feel that Brady has that thing when he does commercials and whatever. But I know we've gone very far astride from the NBA stuff, and Scott has more NBA stuff to get to us. So, Scott, what were you thinking about?
I found an article on Sports Illustrated from an hour ago. Shannon Sharp and well-respected, well-noted LeBron James fan of all time, Skip Bayless, had a conversation about the possibility, and I want to get your thoughts on this. If a trade was available to the Lakers for the Brooklyn Nets to get LeBron. Okay.
It depends on who's going where and who's involved.
Yeah. LeBron is not going anywhere near Kyrie. That relationship is done.
Well, in this case, hypothetically, if Kyrie were somehow to go, it was a hypothetical thrown out there. I wanted to get your thoughts if it was any possibility, I didn't even see a possibility for it, but I wanted to see maybe you guys had something on there that maybe I didn't see.
Kyrie would need to be included in the trade to go to LA.
Yeah, but the idea of Kevin Durant alongside LeBron and playing for, frankly, a team that was expected to be in the finals and fell remarkably short.
I think that
possibly Ben Simmons. Who knows?
I think that Durant, who is running that team, so to speak, who I think we've talked about before, has not figured out that.
I think Kyrie's running the team still, which is insane.
But neither one of them would want LeBron because KD's trying to win the game as the undisputed, win a championship without feeling like he jumped onto a great team. Bringing in LeBron is not going to do that. I think Irving burnt his entire bridges with LeBron. I think that's not a relationship that's going to ever work again. It's possible, people make up, but that was pretty brutal.
You really think that LeBron is going to put up with the Ben Simmons garbage for more than 2 minutes of being a teammate of his? Simmons
the other thing is,
need to trade the entire Nets roster in order to make, aside from Durant, in order to make that work.
Like when the Knicks traded their whole roster for Melo, thinking they were going to get Melo and a good team, and they all ended up being traded, and it was, you kind of stuck with Melo, and that was it. You still had Stoudemire. But the point is...
And that was different because they could have signed Melo in the offseason as a free agent, but decided to trade half their roster for him.
That's true. That's just the Knicks being the Knicks. Well, the point is, KD and LeBron, yes, as a duo, but then the rest of the roster around them, that's not an aging LeBron. If this was LeBron 5 years ago, I would say, okay, let's do this. But LeBron, let's go into next year with just Kevin Durant, not a chance.
Fair. Okay.
LeBron would rather play with Michael Jordan than with Kyrie Irving again.
What's that, Ope?
Kevin Durant needs to figure out a player to bring to that team to police that team, to be the badass that Kevin Durant can't be. Kevin Durant is not that kind of guy. He wasn't that kind of guy when he was in Oklahoma City. He wasn't that kind of guy when he was in Golden State, and he's not that kind of guy here. No great play. There was nobody on that team to grab Kyrie by the ear and say, come here, little boy, get your shot. We need to play 60 games together to be ready for the playoffs. Had this team, and you taken Green and just put him on that team, or you took Marcus Smart, these are two guys, defensive kinds of guys, they would have grabbed them by the ear and done that. You can see that Smart did that and got Brown and Tatum on the same page. He came out and said, these two dudes aren't on the same page. And
that's when they took off, too.
And that's when they took off. That's what Kevin Durant needs to find this offseason if he is a GM type great star player that he wants to try to be. And I agree with
Durant.
No, we'll just make more burner accounts to trash talk them.
Yeah. And the problem is with Kyrie and Durant is Kyrie is Robin, but he thinks he's Batman, and Kevin Durant is Batman, but he's really a Robin in terms of mentality and personality. That is the issue. And so it's no. And I said, LeBron would rather team up with Michael Jordan in his age today than play with Kyrie Irving again.
Yeah.
So he'd rather play with 60-year-old Michael Jordan.
Yep, 100%.
No, I agree because, I agree. And I think, Brandon, I think you and I are so on the same page about this issue and we're saying it differently, but there needs to be, right? We agree. There needs to be somebody on that team, and it's not Kevin Durant who's going to be that glue guy. And we've seen it in Oklahoma City where it doesn't have to be the best player. And we're seeing it in Boston right now where it doesn't have to be the best player. Sometimes it is. Like in Miami, it's Jimmy. He's Butler is not messing around. But you need that guy, and there's no guy there in Brooklyn. Until there is, I don't care how many superstars you throw there.
Go trade for Lillard. Go trade for Lillard in Portland. Bring Lillard over to Brooklyn.
Still won't be that guy there, though. Is Lillard that guy? I don't know that he's that guy.
I would trust him and Durant in the playoffs more than Kyrie. I don't know what I'm getting from Kyrie anymore. I really don't.
That's for sure.
Yeah,
Kyrie is an enigma wrapped in a
plus
eggshell.
Plus Lillard's not going to promote himself to team CEO and be the Jerry Jones of the Brooklyn Nets and kind of drive that team into God knows where. So,
where does Steve Nash fit into all of this? Granted, most NBA coaches these days are just useless empty suits who can be easily replaced and don't have any real authority over much of anything anymore. Yeah, they're empty polo shirts, I guess, now.
Yeah.
Because Steve Nash, much like Frank Vogel with the Lakers this year, he seems to have just no control over any of this for a team that he's supposedly supposed to be coaching and, at least have some kind of pulse on the locker room. Or is that just not a thing at all in the NBA anymore?
Yeah, but the Nets are
maybe Pop and Kerr can do, and Spoelstra can do that. They're the only coaches I can think of off the top of my head.
Nets
Everybody
aren't
else
throwing the Nets aren't throwing Nash under the bus like the Lakers were with Frank Vogel too. Nash just seems to just be the head coach. Like it's kind of he's just a cog in the machine. He doesn't seem to be a driving force in that organization, and that's also a problem. It's not his fault. It's kind of the hand he was dealt, but it's a little bit he's in over his head. That's what it is too.
That's the issue with the Nets in general, is that there is no driving force anywhere. It's not the owner who's just who's Joseph Tsai, Chinese billionaire, just there to count his money. Cool, good for him. You have a coach who's just a part of the machine, yet who's actually running the machine? Kyrie, Durant, Harden wanted out because he wasn't running it. who's running this? Just aside from the Robin that thinks he's Batman and the Batman that is actually Robin. I don't
right.
see anybody else. There's no adult in the room at all.
Exactly. And thank you, because that is where I'm saying get a Marcus Smart, get a Green on your team to be that adult, because it's not going to be your best player with either of those two guys as your best player. And it's hard in the NBA to find anyone who's better, honestly, than those two guys to be that guy. And that is what you have going on, is that there is no adult in the room, and no one's willing to find that adult. So they're going to continue to flounder with great names and run into a Boston, a Bucks,
and be the only team thus far to be swept.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. This leads me to another point that I wanted to bring up about how this is a microcosm of just the difference in the playoffs are like night and day between the NBA and the NHL. The Nets were the only team that gets swept in the first round, as you mentioned, but none of the first rounds went more than 6 games. None of them were any upsets. There is no first round. Like, about now is right when the NBA playoffs start to get interesting every year, about midway through the second round. And even so far in the second round, there's been more talk about things happening off the court, like stupid fan behavior in Dallas, or players playing dirty in the Memphis Warriors series, trying to injure each other, but not as much of the stuff on the court. You're starting to see that a little bit. Then you look at the NHL. The New York Rangers are down 3-1 to the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first round after New York had their third best regular season record all time, and second or third best in the league this year. And they're down 3-1 to a Penguins team that is on their third string goalie, Louis Domingue, who was so bad in a cup of coffee with the Devils 2 years ago that they essentially traded him for a bag of pucks after he won 3 games in 16 starts. And he's now on a hot streak, starting from earlier in this series after an injury. This never happens in the NBA. But in the NHL, where these guys are all playing, and there's actually quality hockey, and there's right from the start of the playoffs. Meanwhile, in the NBA, you have these stupid play-in games where somebody that wins 35 games in the season can somehow get into the playoffs. But they can be the cannon fodder for the number 1 seed. At least when the first round was 5 games instead of 7, there was an element of randomness that came into play. So you had teams like the Nuggets beating Seattle in '94. You had the Knicks winning in the late '90s 2 years in a row as a low seed, including making the finals as an 8th seed. That doesn't happen today. There's only about 8 teams that are any good in any given year, yet there's 20 with a chance to make the playoffs. And the rest of the league is actively trying to lose. And the players aren't even trying half the games because of the stupid load management. You have 82 games that are mostly meaningless and 20 teams that have a chance at the playoffs. And there's only 8 of them that are any good. Why? This is all a waste.
Well, it is, but you're right. So, first of all, I don't know whether you're right or wrong, because I don't know what, in your mind, you feel the value of a playoff system is. Because a playoff system obviously introduces some amount, varying by sport, of randomness into choosing a champion over saying at the end of the season, it was obvious this 15-1 team in football or this 72-win team in basketball, or the 16-0, 18-0 team, 16-0 team in football was the best team. We introduced this playoffs, which is inherently some randomness. The problem with basketball is that a good team over 7 games can usually, pretty consistently even, overcome that randomness very well. While in hockey and in baseball, it can't. That randomness is it's too short a period of time, especially in baseball, where your best pitcher may only get 2 games, 3 games. So I don't know if the problem is that for you that you want randomness, in which case you're never going to get it in basketball unless you cut down to such a small thing.
And
Or
that's
if
why I
not
like college basketball over the NBA, because you do have that in March Madness, where you don't have,
but
you
you're
don't have the same
but you're
5 teams
losing
winning every year.
and by getting that unpredictability, you may not be rewarding the best team, and that's the counter argument. I'm not making a stance. I'm playing devil's advocate. That's my rant on the subject. Scott, what's your rant on the subject?
My rant actually is going to go in a little bit of a different direction. You guys, oh my God, I'm losing my voice.
Well, can I just say just one last point on the basketball thing, though, just opposed to like a football or NHL. The game within the game of basketball allows for one singular player to be able to take over a game. That is not the case in hockey and football. Yes, a running back or a receiver can go off the chain and run or catch for 200 yards, but you could still lose. Like, the chances of a guy putting up 60, 70, 80 points in a game and losing are very, very, very low. And so that's what I think it is. In basketball, at the end of the day, the best players, the best rosters are still going to float to the top of the chain, and that's it.
The only disagreement I have to that, Brandon, is a goalie in the NHL playoffs. Because there have been many times over the years where a usually average goalie or a rookie or somebody will just come out of nowhere and just have a hot streak for several weeks, and then the team will go on a much deeper run than expected.
I can agree with that.
But you're right that basketball is easier for one player to take over.
And I also say that just because the goalie can't just flat out take the puck out on an open break and go down the ice, so that's the only thing to that. But other than that, Scott, back to you on your train of thought.
Yeah, JD, you mentioned Domingue and the Devils and everything like that, and the messages and the conversations that we had as a group yesterday. You referred to the team with the Mickey Mouse organization, which was the the nickname that Wayne Gretzky had given the team back in the early 80s. As a Devils fan for now almost 40 years, the team is actually in existence 40 years next year. This is the biggest effing Mickey Mouse organization I have ever seen come out of tri-state hockey. You know, I have been a fan of this team for a long time. I remember the 80s. I remember how that was a bit of a struggle. But this past decade has been unbridled, unmitigated garbage from this team. You know,
go hire Trotz.
What's that?
Go hire Trotz.
They need to fire Lindy Ruff first.
Go ahead. Fine.
They should never have even hired in the first place.
They put so much money into Dougie Hamilton, which wasn't a bad idea. But every single year, it doesn't matter what this team does. It doesn't matter what this team does. Every single year, it's garbage every single year. And as a fan, since he was, 7, 8 years old, I can't handle it anymore. You know, Brandon, I told you the other day on basically when we were at Citi Field, I told you outright, it's like, I'm not even following hockey because I there used to be something about rooting against the Rangers. I've been dead inside as a Devils fan. I checked out probably December, January, the latest. So I don't even care if the Rangers succeed or not. Back in 2013, when the Rangers went to the Stanley Cup Finals, I was all about any team that they were playing against. In this case, the Kings. Kings beat the Devils the year prior. I was a hardcore Kings fan because you know what? To the Rangers. Now I just don't care because my team is so unbridledly, unmitigatedly terrible year after year after year after year after year that as a fan and someone who's been there through the trenches, I am sick and tired of these friggin' trenches. And I can't take it anymore.
I agree with you.
I really wish I could swear right now. By God, do I wish I could swear.
As another recently suffering Devils fan and growing up as a fan of the Devils, where their championship runs kept me sane, being a fan of the Jets, Mets, and Knicks. It is sad what has happened to this team, and it's strange when the player, when the GM, who was the architect of those championship teams, was also the same GM who was so stubborn to adjust to the new NHL that the team was completely gutted. They didn't draft well for a decade. So the cupboard was less than bare when they finally did gently nudge him out the door in 2015, where he went to Toronto and then to the Islanders. But he did the same stuff with the Islanders that he was doing with the Devils at the end of his tenure, which is take on a bunch of bad contracts, throw money out stupidly, run your best, hire a hot coach, run the players into the ground, which paid off in the short term, where the Islanders did make the semifinals last year, but they crashed and burned with COVID issues and a brutal schedule because of the construction of their new arena, where they started the season on like a 14-game road trip or something. And then they had COVID issues, and then just they were buried from there. And they have no prospects, no nothing. The same thing. So for all of the success that Lou Lamoriello has had, the Islanders are about to head into that same dump. Now, Lou has been gone from the Devils organization for 7 years, but they have not done much since then. So it's not all.
Yeah, two different GMs in that time.
Right, and there were some questionable moves by Ray Shero, but it kind of got the team from barely a minor league level team, at least to the bottom of the league. They've had some awful coaches in that time. John Hines was terrible, and the Lindy
Ruff. But he did get the team to a Stanley Cup Finals, though, so you got to give it that.
DeBoer got them to the Stanley Cup Finals. Hines didn't do jack.
DeBoer, I'm sorry, you're right, not Hines.
Yeah, and DeBoer, who has since gone back to the finals with San Jose, and with Vegas. So, actually, no, he didn't make the finals, but he is in Vegas now. And so, Lindy Ruff hasn't had a good season in 15 years as a coach. And he's still coasting off one finals run with Dominic Hasek over 20 years ago. He had some of the worst when he was an assistant for the Rangers. They had the worst defense in the NHL, and they got better.
The Rangers laughed at the Devils when the Devils signed him.
Right, and then they hired Ruff because the two best coaches that were available that offseason, Peter Laviolette and Gerard Gallant, I forget which did which, but one of them told them straight up no, or told the Devils straight up no, I'm not coming. The other one put a salary number out there that was so ridiculously high that the Devils said, yeah, no way. Gallant, of course, went to the Rangers instead, and he's now the coach of, and he's brought them back to respectability. And the Rangers have completed their rebuild faster than the Devils have, who've been in this rebuild essentially.
They're the Pittsburgh Penguins of the Pittsburgh Pirates of the NHL. It's
not quite at that point, but definitely is getting there. And as an afterthought in the New York in New Jersey sports market, where they don't even have a dedicated beat writer from any newspaper, website, or other publication,
including the New Jersey specific papers too, the Ledger, the Record, and things like that.
Right,
they don't even have a dedicated guy.
Yeah. So, is there any other team in the Big Four pro sports that doesn't have any dedicated media coverage at all? Other than the New Jersey Devils currently. That is sad. And it's also worth noting that Harris Blitzer also owned the 76ers. So they went through the same thing. Trust the process. Well, the process is happening with the Devils. Supposedly, let's see if Nico Hischier can actually stay healthy for a whole season. Jack Hughes made some big jumps this year. They need a goalie and some better defense, and they're trying. They might be keeping Ruff, but they at least got rid of all the assistants. Yeah. But now that Trotz, who went to the Islanders coming off of a Stanley Cup win with the Washington Capitals a few years back, we'll see where that goes. But I do not anticipate Devils ownership doing the smart move and firing Ruff to hire him. But you know who else has an opening, and I think will end up hiring Barry Trotz that will drive us even further into the abyss? The Flyers.
Yeah. But you know what? Maybe we'll talk about this sometime in the near future, but I want to keep things rolling a little bit. But I just had to vent for my own therapy, and, it's cheaper than alcohol. Moving on a little bit in this case. Brandon, you threw a comment out there. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes on this before we move over to Formula One. You talked about which pitching staff is better, the Yankees or the Mets. Now, I did a little of a numerical deep dive, as I'm prone to doing in this case here, but I wanted to get your thoughts and anybody else's as well as to which one you think is better. And by the way, did you mean starters, relievers, or both?
Starters, just for rotations. They're both. So both teams first to 20 wins in both leagues. Mets were still the first. But yes, I would say player for player, Mets, and this is all still without DeGrom. But the Yankees, because I heard it on the radio earlier today, and I wanted to bring it up to you guys, see what you thought. I'm still going with the Mets, even though today maybe the Yankees, but I think the question would be, if you were to put a Yankees player into the Mets rotation, where would they be placed? Would they be ahead of Scherzer, ahead of Bassett, ahead of DeGrom if he were in the rotation? So I pass it along to other Mets and Yankees fans around the table here.
You guys want to go first?
Obi.
All right. Honestly, I haven't really watched enough of either team this season to really have much of a difference. I mean, DeGrom, when healthy, I think is better than Cole. So we can start from there. The rotations top to bottom are comparable. Bullpen probably a slight edge to the Yankees. But
Yeah,
I'd say bullpen Yankees, Mets starters.
And I feel – go ahead, please.
Yeah, I know. So I'm going to answer it differently by saying, what an interesting question, and what a question that reflects the truth about baseball today. When I read the question in our chat, I immediately thought, who has the wording, who has a better pitching staff? And I immediately thought, who has the better starters? Scott, you asked the question, starters, relievers, blah, blah, blah. I think in today's – I think that, to me, I'm not going to make a judgment call here because I'm in JD's boat. But what an interesting comment that in today's baseball world, the pitching staff really is 1 through 10, and possibly the two guys who send back and forth to the 10-day DL and make it 1 through 12. So, we were talking about tweaking rules earlier and later in terms of getting more offense into baseball. This is one of those places where the game has changed so much that even the term pitching staff has a different connotation, I think, to people who've watched the games at different stages, be they born in 1950 or 1999. Back over to you, Scott, with the numbers.
Here's my take on this. I think as the starters, I have to go with the Mets here. I think overall, for now, on May 10th, 2022, the Yankees have it better. We're looking over the numbers in this case here. The Yankees have had 28 starts, 142 innings, which is just a hair over 5 innings per starter. The Mets have had 30 starts, 165 innings, which is 5.5 innings per starter. So when you look at that sort of thing, you have a bullpen that is not actually is expected as much to be reliable. The Mets bullpen is not what basically the Yankee bullpen is. I don't think anybody can argue that one in general. But that half an inning right there on average throughout the entire season so far, with 2 games additionally on top of it, tells me a lot that basically the Mets have better starters in general because they're going longer and putting less pressure on the bullpen as a result, putting less pressure on Diaz, less pressure on everyone else there. The Yankee bullpen, the Yankee starters right now, Garrett Cole has gotten together for the moment, but while they have a lower ERA by 0.4 of a point, they also, as it turns out, have a WAR of 2.5 less. So the WAR for the Yankees starters is 2.8, but 3.3 for the Mets. And that half an inning average that I mentioned, that is the big reason for it. What that is going to mean to me long-term is come July, August, and September, the New York Yankee bullpen, which is best in Major League Baseball at 231, is very likely going to get tired, burn itself out, And as a result, they may struggle down the stretch as the starters get tired, and frankly, so does the offense. So I will give the Yankees pitching staff as a whole the edge now, but see me again in 3 months.
Well, Spider-Man, I mean, Garrett Cole hasn't been the same since they took his web fluid, I mean, spider tack away from him. Let's put that first
Garrett
of all.
Garrett Cole.
Yeah.
Garrett Cole.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Today, this date of the calendar, it's Yankees, but overall, the Mets bullpen has been, not Diaz, but the overall bullpen they've been bothering me. Ottavino, I don't think has been it. Lopez or Rodriguez, who we traded to the Yankees for Castro, has been hit or miss. The other guys, Sean Reed Foley and some of these guys, they've been a little bit hit and miss. But it's the starters. And I think having them go, whether it be a half inning or even a whole inning further than the Yankees, it's I don't think it's too much of a stat where it's even worth mentioning, because I think it cancels out between edge to starting rotation for the Mets, middle bullpen relief Yankees, and then closing. I would still give edge to Diaz.
But here's the one thing I'm going to add to that. I'll turn it over to you guys. The Yankees right now also lead Major League Baseball in wins by relievers. 13 of their 20 wins have come from the relief staff, and only 7 have come from starters. What does that tell you?
Because they're coming from behind more.
Could be that.
That's how you get bullpen wins. Otherwise, the starter would win if they were leading.
But again, if the starters is averaging barely over 5, you have starters that are only doing 4.
It tells me that the win stat for pitchers in baseball is becoming antiquated.
It is
fair.
Yeah, can we just redo the whole the pitcher wins lost system? It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, it doesn't match the way the game is played.
It makes no sense. It just makes
especially since the game is played now, where starters automatically turn into a pumpkin if they see if they go through the lineup 3 times.
Yeah, right.
So you get players getting yanked in the middle of a perfect game after 90 pitches.
Yeah, because the nerds have to go. Nope. He's got to come out. The nerd.
I wonder if that's a factor here. I wonder if that's a factor here with the Mets, with Buck Showalter being an old school manager, which while he is more in touch with analytics now, he at least has the old school baseball gut instinct of, okay, this pitcher's having a good night. Let me leave him out there another inning and then see what happens, and I'll grab him out if he gets in trouble. Whereas coward Aaron Boone, you never see that from. You never see anything like that from Mr. By the Notebook Aaron Boone, who the only thing that I see of anything from Aaron Boone is just whining about anything. Just whine about this, whine about that. No matter how good the team is, it's always whine. It's always some kind of whining excuse.
Well, I think in this case, the reason why Buck Showalter works so well with the Mets is because the Mets are taking a very unorthodox approach to a lot of the things they're doing. He is an unorthodox manager in today's baseball, and that's why that blend is so perfect.
Yes.
There is, between him and Don Mattingly, there's no managers in Major League Baseball that I want to see get to a World Series more than either one of them, because both of those guys had such near misses. And for Buck,
Dusty Baker too.
What's that?
Dusty Baker too.
Dusty
Baker's been to just the win.
But he's been to a World Series.
Right.
He just hasn't won.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, but Buck and Don Mattingly, they never got there. Even when Mattingly was bench coach and hitting coach, they came close, but they never got him there. Dusty Baker, I would put him in third, but he at least got to a dance.
Yeah, well, look, funny enough, just back to our comments that people don't see, he got to a dance with the best player in baseball by far, having one of his best periods of his career. Mm-hmm. We can argue about how he got there and how we feel about that. And he didn't win a World Series. And that, although we were talking about Ernie Banks and talking about Mike Trout now, that is a thing about baseball that has never changed, is that you can have great, great players who never get a championship. Ted Williams, I think Will Clark did get one, I'm not sure. Ken Griffey Jr., the best player in baseball does not get his team, is not able to put his team on his shoulders like the best player in basketball and even the best player in football if he's your quarterback. If he's a different position, then you need more people to help him out. But that is why the All-Star game used to be about making sure every team got a guy on, because there were great players that you wouldn't see otherwise. Now you at least get to see them. So some managers are in the same boat where they're just really good, but weird things happen in baseball because it only takes one really bad, two great starters to get you to the playoffs, but then 4 starters need to get you through the playoffs, and now 8 bullpen relievers and 2 closers and everything else that's involved.
And you have teams that can essentially take the first half of the season off, go on a hot streak, and then go on a deep run in the playoffs. The Washington Nationals in last place after 50 games, in mid-June, go on and win a World Series. That's always happened. Or like the Cardinals winning 82, 83 games, and then winning the World Series twice. So there's always been that aspect of it. And it's happened on and off over the years. You had Andre Dawson with the Cubs in the 80s, same deal. I forget the exact number, but out of the All-Star players that were picked for the All-Star game last year, so many of them were on the majority of them were on teams that didn't make the playoffs. The top 5 MVP vote receivers were all on teams that missed the playoffs last year in baseball.
Probably sounds about right. So, all right. So we got about 7-ish minutes left at this point. Miami made some history. Formula One this weekend. Now, Eduardo has come on record by basically before the show, or I'm putting him on record now, by saying that he loved it top to bottom. It was amazing. It was incredible. He loved every second of it. Obi, apparently you're on the other side of the fence there.
I'm going to say that after talking to Eduardo, we agree, because the Miami Grand Prix was an unbelievable event, if not a great auto race. The excitement started when you started to hear about this fake marina filled with yachts. When you got to see it on TV, you knew it wasn't water, but my mom, when she was watching on Mother's Day for a moment, she's like, wait, that's not real water. It looked just about like real water. The prices were through the roof, Super Bowl level prices. When the racing actually started in free practice,
water?
It was wood, painted. It looked like water.
Oh. Yeah. Didn't they just build a track in the parking lot around the Dolphin Stadium?
In the parking lot. They just turned the parking lot into a 3.5-mile racetrack. Absolutely. Under the freeway, there was a hill on the track. It was great in terms of all that kind of stuff. In free practice number 2, which I was watching, Carlos Sainz gets in a huge accident for Ferrari. They red flag it. They had 5 minutes to just chat. At that exact moment, Mario Andretti was in the booth with the commentators, and so they got to interview him without talking about the race straight up. He gets to tell us that Michael Andretti, Racing from America, is trying to get into F1. He wants to bring in an American driver on an American team, which F1 is just continually trying to get done. And he doesn't pull any punches. He's like, it's the teams that are in now. They have to approve us. Everyone else has done it. The teams have to do it. Put all the pressure right on the teams. That was great. That bit of intrigue. We'll see how that goes for those of us watching. The other big news that came out of that free practice number 2, that's just an hour of them whipping around the track. George Russell gets the fastest time, putting Mercedes out there. It looks like qualifying is going to be 3 teams, 6 racers. Super exciting stuff. So again, the excitement is building and building. You get to the qualifying. Ferrari gets 1-2, putting Verstappen on the back foot. Last year's champ struggling. Lewis Hamilton qualifies ahead of Russell finally. He's sitting there on the 3rd row with Alfa Romeo's Bottas. All wonderful stuff. And then the race starts. You get all these celebrities, as Eduardo was talking about, the English guys going, it's all the English. We get the whole English thing. He's going up and down the track trying to talk to celebrities. Half of them don't want to talk to him. They show this piece with again, I wasn't listening, just watching. So it's got Hamilton and Brady and Beckham as
okay,
and I think So I know you're talking about how Brady gets to sit there and go, "Hey, I'm the least famous," but I'm watching and going,
No, I get to sit there and say that.
Yeah, Brady's the least famous, and that's what you've been saying. But I'm watching, going, are Brady and Hamilton looking at Beckham, going, it's better to win a lot than just to be good looking. But I don't know what they were fully talking about. But then the race starts, and in the start, Verstappen passes Seitz, so he's in number 2. By lap 9, he passes Leclerc. He's in first. By lap 41 and 57, he's 7 minutes and a half ahead. Fortunately, there's an accident, gets us a yellow flag. We get the pace car out, brings everyone together. And for 2 or 3 laps, it looks like Leclerc has a chance to pass Verstappen. But by lap 50, the race is over. Verstappen has a lead. Unless we get another yellow flag, it's not happening. Overall, what we learned is that the straight line speed of Red Bull is just too fast on that track, and it may be continuing. Verstappen finishes races, he wins the race. Last year, he won out when he was able to finish almost all of his races. Finishing races has been a problem for him and Red Bull, but they may finally have gotten over their reliability issues. So for Red Bull fans, that's a big deal. And then the other thing that went on is that George Russell finished 5th. He's the only driver to be in the top 5 for every race this year. And beat Hamilton again, and actually passed Hamilton towards the end of the race. Now, there was lots of talk. Hamilton, is he? Will he? Won't he come back? I'm not in the man's head, but I do know this. He has the yellow antenna on his car. It's like the only way you can really tell the 2 Mercedes cars, any 2 cars apart for the same team. Traditionally, this has gone to the second driver. I don't know if that was intentionally done by Hamilton, like they say, to match his helmet, or if he knows his mindset wasn't there. So with that, that's my Formula One wrap-up. I give it to you guys to give proper sign-offs in our last 2 minutes. Thanks for hearing me out.
Oh, no. Our privilege. I know you've been wanting to do that, and it's well earned on this side. So, all right, we got to wrap this up. Brandon, JD, do you have any final thoughts?
Brandon, you can go first.
No, I just got Heat and Sixers. We have Game 5 tonight. After both teams defending home court, we have Embiid back. I do want to say, Obi, I do want to get your thoughts on this. Are you more concerned, or do you trust Harden's playoff inconsistencies more than Heat's 3-point shooting slumps? Because I think the Heat are going to get back into shape tonight, get this series back on track.
The old saying in the NBA playoffs is the series doesn't start till the home team loses. I think he takes this in 7. I do not trust James Harden at all. So that's my unfortunate, heartfelt feeling. We're going to take it 7 now that Embiid's back. We're going to win when we come home. He's just too good. And he's probably real angry about not winning the MVP. So
I feel the same way about
that.
Embiid is going to be on the warpath after not winning the MVP. I think, but I do think that Miami wins tonight. And sets up for Game 6 back in Philly,
and make our coaches wear suits again. I will say that continuously.
At least for the playoffs.
Especially for the playoffs.
Get NFL coaches in suits.
NFL coaches look homeless.
Hey, back in the day, it was classy, but today it doesn't translate.
Only
Could you imagine
baseball.
Could you imagine baseball? Yeah, baseball manager in a suit today? Nope.
See George Carlin's rant about sports for basically how coaches are on that one. Anyway, we got to wrap this up at this point. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Obi. Thank you, JD. 7 o'clock tonight, Tales from the Film Set. We are doing 100% top to bottom, full spoiler review of Multiverse of Madness. If you do not want, I was going to say, if you don't want to know what happened with that, or actually, if you don't want to know what happened with that, don't tune in. If you've already seen it, or otherwise you just don't care and you want to save yourself $20 plus, whatever food is, check us out. We're going to cover that thing top to bottom, deep dive the snot out of that. Also, Rob and I are going to be talking about our biggest number 1 audition fails. Mine actually involves someone saying, "Okay, good, he looks human now." I'm not going to mention ESPN by name there. But anyway, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you as always. I'm Scott. That's Brandon. That's JD. And that's Obi. Thanks as always. Appreciate Eduardo for the assistance on everything. Take care. Be awesome.